taking its time. I think we're recording, but it
Yeah,
hasn't given.
it's recording for me. Okay.
Okay.
Welcome everybody to the Tech Academy's Tech Talk. Today we're joined by Tech Academy graduate Lyman McBride. He's a full stack engineer at JobNimbus LLC. His talk is going to go over the importance of unit testing and then other concepts like assertions and clean code and preventing tech debt. So if you've got any questions, feel free to leave those in the chat box and we'll relay those over to Lyman. Yeah, thanks for being here, Lyman. You can take it away.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, if there's any, if you at any point can't hear me or something, just please yell. Yeah, so I graduated from the Tech Academy in May of last year, got my job in June. It's in Lehi, Utah, for a tech company called JobNimbus. And a lot of the things that I've learned over the first part of my coding career are kind of contained in here. But I especially wanted to focus it on unit testing because I feel like I've really gained kind of some really strong appreciation for unit testing. And I think it's something that can be really helpful to those who are looking into, either in a boot camp or looking into, getting a job in technology soon. And so I've titled it today, Slow is Smooth and Smooth is Fast. This is actually a military term. I don't know if all of you have heard that before, but the idea behind it is that taking things slowly or going the slow route is often faster in the long run. And that's very true for coding. That's not necessarily talking about the runtime of your program, but it is talking about how to construct the code. So today we're going to talk about unit testing specifically. So we'll just start off with what is a unit test, and in true kind of Tech Academy fashion, I tried to write my own definition. I realized the first definition I wrote was a little bit too complicated, so then I wrote a more simple one. But a unit test really is a method or a function that creates an assertion on just a little small unit of code. Where you're talking about usually another method or something in the code that will pass or fail based on the criteria you assign to it. Basically, what I mean by that is a unit test is a method that determines whether your code works or not. Okay, so some things that I didn't know about unit testing before I got my job: unit tests are written by developers. This is not a QA thing. This is a software engineer thing that you write. And what they are supposed to do is cover the functional changes to the system that you're making or adding to it. Okay, so what's a functional change? Maybe you are assigning a new variable, right? You want to make sure that variable is assigned. So you write a unit test to see if it's assigned. Or you add a new if statement. If this is true, then do follow this path, right? You want to write a unit test to make sure that it's, when something is true, you do go down that path, and when whatever you're passing to it is false, you don't go down that path. That's kind of how a unit test is going to determine whether the program is functioning correctly, right? And another great thing about unit tests is usually in the industry, these unit tests will be automated when you push, right? When you are done building your code and you push it up to the cloud and say, hey, I want to merge this into the master branch. It'll run all those unit tests for you just to see if they're all still working, right? So that is what a unit test is. Let's kind of talk about how they look. There's different ways to write unit tests, but the way that we kind of do it at JobNimbus, and I think a very simple way of doing it, is to think of it in 3 steps. You want to arrange, act, and assert. And a lot of this is coming from the Microsoft unit test tutorial. So, and I'll mention that later on, but just so you know, this is kind of where this is coming from. So like, as you can see here in the arrange area, we're just assigning a couple variables, right? One is a number divisible by 3, would be 3 is divisible by 3, and we're assigning an expected response is fizz. You can tell that I'm going to talk a little bit about fizz buzz if anyone has ever heard of that before, but we'll get into that in a little bit. Arranging just means setting up everything. It could be a complicated setup, but the idea is to not have it be a complicated setup and just kind of simple. Okay, so here, that's what we're doing. And then act, that means we want to run the code that we're going to test. Okay, so in this case, it's a method. I don't know if you can see my mouse here. It's a method called create fizzbuzz response. And I'll show this to you guys in a little bit. But that's just a function that I made. And I'm passing this number divisible by 3, which in this case is 3, into it. And that's all we're doing. And we're going to see what response we get from that function. And then the final aspect is called assert, which means we want to determine whether we got what we wanted. In this case, is the response, fizzbuzz response, equal to what we are expecting, which should be fizz. Okay, so very, very simple 3-step process: arrange, act, assert. And I also threw in there a descriptive name for your test because it's important to, I guess, it can be helpful to write a descriptive name so that you know when you come to your unit test later on, you're trying to figure out why some things are failing. You can get a good idea of what this unit test is about just from the name. Okay, that's kind of a slow is smooth and smooth is fast idea. Later on, we're going to be able to be faster because we took some time to write a good name right here at the beginning. So that's sort of the simple anatomy of a unit test. Let's go to the next one. Could talk a little bit more about assertions. There's many different ways to help us determine whether we got the response that we wanted. Sometimes we use R equal, like I did in the last one. Sometimes we use is true or is false if we have a Boolean that we're dealing with. Yes, you could also do are these equal, and then assign a variable to true, and then see the expected response. But it might just be simpler to use a function that says is true, right? I'll go back here and show you what I mean. You would just say assert dot is true, and then there would be like one thing in here that represents a Boolean value, true or false. Same thing for is null, right? We would just get a variable. Is it null? That's what we want to know. Is it true or is it false? Or is it equal to what we're expecting? Okay. Throws exception is one that I'll kind of show you in a little bit. Sometimes we want to throw an exception, and we want to make sure that we throw that exception in the right place. I'll show a couple more examples of that in a minute. But before we do, let's just kind of come back to why we write unit tests. The bottom line, I think, with why we write unit tests is that unit tests help us be more confident in our code. As it's a fourth one, they provide confidence that the code is behaviorally correct, right? So we've got lots of tests in these little areas of the code showing us that it's doing what we think it's doing. And that's important because our code really needs to be changeable, right? Technology is always changing. What we're building is always changing. What input people are putting into it is always changing. And so we need to be able to change our code to adapt to that. And if the system is really complicated, it can be really scary to change even just a minor thing, because you don't know if you're going to break the whole system. So having a lot of unit tests around the whole, everything surrounding what you're changing can be really helpful, because you can then make your change, run your unit tests. Do they pass? If they pass, great. I'm pretty sure I didn't break the whole system, right? That's a really confidence building thing when you're wanting to, especially in today's in today's market, where things are rapidly changing. People are always wanting to putting out more and more quickly. Unit tests are going to help you do that. Some other great things about unit tests are they're very cheap and fast. There's all sorts of testing that happens in software. There's whole engineering positions devoted to writing automation tests and all sorts of web tests, and they can test end-to-end whole features and stuff like that. But those can be expensive. They can take a long time, and by expensive I mean they can be expensive in time and resources, right? It can take a lot of just a long time to run those tests. But unit tests are very quick. You should be able to run your whole battery of unit tests in under 5 minutes, right? And they can help us expose flaws in the code that we've written. They can help us determine, did we miss something here? Did I not put all of the correct ands and ors into my if statement? And then it can also help us expose bugs that maybe we created unintentionally, right? Sometimes we're working in an area of the system, change something, and then somewhere over there, it broke something else we didn't realize. Whereas unit tests surrounding that, then it can expose those bugs as well. I just wanted to add in one more thing that could be helpful, especially for those that are a little more, that are sort of getting into practicing these a little more. There's different paradigms with unit testing, but generally, if you write some code and you want to unit test it, I think a really great way to mentally come to it is to have the hypothesis that my code doesn't work, right? I want to say, okay, this doesn't work, there's a bug in there, and I want to expose that somehow by writing all these unit tests and finding where it's not going to work, right? And if you do that and write all the tests you can think of, eventually you'll arrive at the conclusion that your code does work, right? And you can be confident in that because you have the unit tests to cover all these different potential areas that it could break. Hopefully that makes sense. I don't know if I described that super well, but here's sort of I think this is a quote maybe from a book called Clean Code, which I'll talk about a little bit later. Well-written unit tests are one of the most effective ways to improve the quality, correctness, and changeability of a code base. And I think that's true. It'll make your code cleaner. It'll keep your code functioning correctly and make it easy to change. So some of you might be thinking, I don't have a job yet. I'm still looking for a job. Do I need to know how to write unit tests yet, or can I just learn that later? And the answer is you can probably learn how to do unit tests pretty quickly. But I'll just tell you my story. I didn't know how to write unit tests until I applied for the job that I currently have, and they gave me a coding challenge. And then they said, please unit test with X, Y, and Z options, right? And I said, okay, never written a unit test before. I'm going to use my Tech Academy education and how they taught me to learn on my own and go Google it, which worked great because I had all the knowledge from my boot camp. I was able to really quickly come up with some unit tests for my code, and I did end up getting an interview, as you can tell. But this is often required in interviews, I think, to write a unit test for your coding challenge. So this is something that you can practice pretty easily, and I think it's a great way to work on coding challenges. So if I just go over here, yeah, we can see this might be a little bit small. Maybe I can zoom in here. But this is just like a little coding challenge that I did for myself just yesterday. This is something based on the FizzBuzz idea. The FizzBuzz coding challenge, if anyone doesn't know, is if you the challenge is to write a function that prints the numbers 1 to 100, and if the number is divisible by 3, you print fizz. If it's divisible by 5, you print buzz. And if it's divisible by 3 and 5, you print fizzbuzz. This is sort of a variation on that. I created a little method that is going to return either fizzbuzz or fizzbuzz based on those same parameters. But if the number you give it is not divisible by 3 or 5, it throws an exception right here. And I kind of made my own custom fizzbuzz exception, right? Does that make sense? So we pass a number in. Is this number divisible by 3? Return fizz. If it's divisible by 5, buzz. 15, which is 3 and 5, fizz buzz. Okay. Now, this is just a method. I can't really run this. Some of you might not be in the C# course yet, but this is just a function. Can't really run it without either making a console application or something. But instead of making a console application, I made a unit test, right? So I literally just went to, well, I'm in a different IDE, but you can just go straight to Visual Studio if any of you have done the C# course, and click, open a unit test application, and it'll kind of create the base of this for you. And it'll have this stuff in there. And so here, I kind of showed this earlier. This will test whether what I get back from this function, is divisible by 3, right? So I can just simply go here, run this, and if it fails, that will be a little bit embarrassing. Okay, we got a success, right? So that's that one. But you notice I had like other stuff in here. I had a fizzbuzz exception, right? I wanted to maybe test that we're going to get that if these conditions aren't met. So this is sort of a way to test that something throws exception, right? So you can test all the different areas of this. Do we get 3 when we throw in something that's divisible by 3? Do we get 5? Do we get something that's divisible by 3 and 5? Do we get fizzbuzz? And then, maybe it'll expose something that you didn't realize. Maybe, or maybe you can be confident, yeah, my code is working exactly like I thought it was, and I got a lot of experience writing unit tests, right? So as you are, I don't know if Tech Academy still does the Wednesday roundtables. When I was there, we kind of did a coding challenge every week on Wednesdays, and this is something you can do. If you're doing them in JavaScript, there's plenty of JavaScript libraries with lots of documentation on how to how to write unit tests in JavaScript. If you're doing it in Python, same thing. It's not too difficult to find the resources that you need in order to be able to do this. I think it's a great way to practice doing coding challenges. So that's one of my suggestions as we kind of keep going through this. So just a couple more terms to define as we keep going here. Code coverage is a term that we use in the industry to talk about how many lines of code will be run after we run our unit tests. And that's all it is, right? Line 473, did this get hit by a unit test, right? Line 55, did this get hit by a unit test? And if all the lines are hit, then you get 100% code coverage. Generally, a lot of places shoot for around 80%. It'll depend on where you're at. But the one caveat with code coverage is to remember that it's not always an indication of the correctness of your code. It just is an indication of whether your code was run. And if you can imagine, we have an if statement that has lots of, if this, and this, and this, or that, right? You might have to write 4 unit tests just for that single line of code to make sure you've done all the behaviors, because it could do 4 different things based on 4 different things that you put into it. So that's my little caveat with code coverage, and you kind of get the definition there. I kind of want to move in now to a more general concept that is really helpful in keeping your code updatable. And this is the idea of clean code and readability. And there's just some, fancy terms here that get thrown around a lot. But I'll show you what I mean by them. We have IDEs. That's like a fancy name for the program you write your code in. And these IDEs, they remember the variable names that we write. They remember the function names that we write. So you could have, you probably wouldn't want to do it this long, but you could have a function name that is super long. And your IDE can pick it up, it can tell you which one it is after you type just a couple letters, and then you press enter, and boom, you've got your whole function name there, right? So my point is, it doesn't pay to try to abbreviate your naming, really, because if you try to abbreviate, you'll probably forget what it means, and then it'll be kind of hard to read later on. Let me show you kind of an example of this. Okay, so here's something good because it probably works. If I is less than or equal to 10 and I is greater than 5, do something, right? That's some code that we could write. We don't really know what I is. If you're coming to this, you're like, okay, I know, okay, now I got it, right? Took a little bit. A little bit better might be to name, instead of I, age. Okay, we know this has to do with something that has to be between the age of 10 and 5. We don't know if it's years or if it's a person or an object or what, but whatever it is, if it's less than or equal to 10 and greater than 5, we're going to do something in here. But maybe a best example would be to actually just make this a tiny little function. If is child elementary school age, then do this, right? Now we know, okay, whatever we're dealing with is probably a record for a child, right? This is their age, right? So we're dealing in years. I mean, this is a very small function, but now this up here reads more like prose than like a computer. And that's very helpful, I think, for humans to be able to read this and say, okay, that's what that means. And not only that, but if something changes and maybe we're not dealing with where maybe the elementary school goes up to 6th grade or something like that, you can change the age very quickly by using this function down here, instead of having to change it in many different places. But that's just a side effect. My point really here is this is a lot more readable. So there we go. So on that subject, readability of code and unit tests both help us with this concept, which is tech debt. This is another word. I heard it on my first day at work. I was like, I have no idea what that is. I started Googling it. Then my coworker just kind of talked to me about it for a little bit. But the idea behind tech debt is just that if you write something really messily, it's going to be hard to come back to it later and adjust it, right? So you create some debt for yourself because you're going to have to take more time later to do what you could have done at the beginning. That's all it is, really. So what creates tech debt? When your code isn't clean or it doesn't have unit tests, right? Like I said at the beginning, you're not going to feel very confident about changing your code if you don't have unit tests around it, because you don't know what you broke when you changed it. It also might just be very difficult to change the code if it's not clean, if you can't really read it or understand what's happening as you're going through maybe this really long function, right? So writing things in ways that are easy to read, understand, and putting batteries of unit tests around it are ways to sort of minimize tech debt. I don't think there's any way to push code without having some amount of tech debt, right? Some amount of uncleanliness, but yeah, I think this is the way to really minimize it for the future. So next, I'll just kind of give a couple helpful resources that were helpful for me. I mentioned earlier the Microsoft unit test tutorial. That's because I had to write my coding challenge in C# for my job interview. And so I went straight there. But there's lots of other unit test tutorials out there in different languages. You know, if you're doing whatever language you're doing, there's going to be plenty of resources for you. I also mentioned Robert Martin's Clean Code. I'm not getting paid to say this. I'm just saying that it's the first book I read when I got my job, and it was very helpful and taught me things like what I just showed you with the function, abstracting that function out. You know, there's ways to write code that's very readable and make it easier to update. And then if you're doing coding challenges, Code Wars and Leak Code, aha, Tyler's holding up his copy of Clean Code there. So yes, so you know, if you need a coding challenge and you're not sure where to go, I pretty much did a Code Wars challenge every day while I was you know, looking for a job. And I think if I'd done a unit test or two with each coding challenge, that would have prepared me a little bit more for that first coding challenge I had to do on my job interview. So that's the main, that's the bulk of what I had. So I'll leave it on this QA slide, question and answer slide. If anyone has any questions right off the bat, I'm happy to answer. Otherwise, I can answer a question that I have been asked pretty regularly. So.
Yeah, so it looks like Jeanette says, I'm in my first month of my boot camp. I've heard of these interview coding challenges. Do you interview virtual or in person first and leave with the challenge? And then do you have a timeline of when you need to return the interview challenge? Just trying to visualize how this works. Thanks.
Sure. Yeah, I can only speak from my own limited experience. For my current job, I was a referral, and after they decided they wanted to interview me, the first step was a coding challenge. So the tech recruiter reached out, said, here's your coding challenge. Please have it back to us. I can't remember. I think it was like a couple days. Said, please have it back to us by Wednesday or whatever. And so then I was, just trying to come up with the best kind of well-written coding challenge I could, unit tests that they asked for. And then, I pushed that to GitHub and submitted it to them. I want to say it was like 2 days, or maybe 3. But it was not super extensive. It actually was a coding challenge I had done before. So that was helpful. But after that, they brought me in for an in-person interview. I drove up to Lehigh. I'm in Provo right now, which is about 30 minutes south of Lehigh. And drove up there, did the interview in person. At that interview, it was with a few managers. And they asked me some technical questions. They had me do another coding challenge that was a little simpler than the previous one. And asked me a few more questions about my more soft questions. And then I went home after that, but I felt really good about it. And then maybe, I can't remember if it was a week later or just another like 3 or 4 days later, they brought me in for another interview with the VP of engineering. And that interview was all about culture fit. I didn't do any technical questions in that interview. It's about half an hour with him. And after that, that was on Friday, and on Monday they offered me the position. So that was that job. And I said that one in such detail because that's what I had the most experience with. There was a couple other places that wanted to do an interview first. Sometimes the first interview was just more of a screening to see if you had enough experience for them to even consider you. Other times, the first interview, I had this weird one where the first interview was, the first time they reached out to me, they said, hey, let's have an interview. And they just talked to me the whole time about the stuff they wanted this person to do. I think they were trying to see if I'd even be interested in the job that they had. And then the second interview had some more technical questions and such. So it can really depend on the place. But I would say always at some point you're going to have to do a coding challenge in front of somebody. And the technology. My current job was actually the only one that I interviewed in person for. All the other ones were online on Zoom. Except for I was in the interview process for one job when I got current one. And I did 2 interviews online with them. And then the third interview they wanted to do in person. But I said, I've already got a job. I'm going to stick with this one.
Well, and Jeanette, I will let you know also that when you get to our job placement course, you're going to learn about the coding challenges. You'll learn about the technical interview, and you're going to get lots of practice with it. So you'll have mock interviews and that kind of thing. So you will get good experience with that at the end of the program.
I agree. Yeah, I can't say enough good things about the people that I worked with in the job placement department. I felt like all of that was really well handled for me. I felt like I had a lot of experience. I felt really confident actually going into my interviews because of that.
Well, I am really glad that you brought up Uncle Bob Martin. That's what they call him.
Yeah, he goes by Uncle Bob on all of his videos.
Yeah, he's got a lot of videos on YouTube. So if you have any time to look him up, I definitely recommend it. He's just kind of a father figure in coding, and he's been around a long time, but he's got lots of great wisdom. So, Lyman, have you read any of his other books?
Yeah, so Clean Architecture is another book that he has written, and it's on my docket. I was going to start reading it last month, but we ended up as a dev department reading another book about system architecture together. So I've been sort of taken up in that other book. But the little bit that I've read of clean architecture looks also very good and comes well recommended from many senior developers.
Yeah, and I like the one thing he really emphasizes is creating, when you create methods or functions, only have it do one thing, and that really helps to keep the code clean.
Yes. Yes.
A lot of great tips from Bob Martin, definitely.
Absolutely. I think I saw Tyler had raised his hand. Don't know if he's able to unmute.
Hang on, I can unmute the mics for a moment. All right, Tyler, if you have a question you want to ask, you can go ahead and ask through the microphone now.
I was just going to add to what Lyman was saying about the coding challenges and stuff. It was basically very few of the interviews I did, you got a coding challenge right away. It was more of like a soft skill, technical, and then it was like the second or third interview where you would get like a coding challenge. So it wasn't like right off the bat they want to see you code. It was like, no, they want to talk to you, screen you a little bit before you go through it. And with the development position I'm in now, I didn't even take one. They just technical questions and soft skills, got the job. So no coding challenges there.
Yeah, it all depends on the company and what they're looking for. And yeah, usually the technical like interview and the coding challenges do come like at the second or third, like later in the interview process. So that is a definitely a good point.
Yeah, it's not something you're going to see like right away. I think the only one that I did that was like right away a coding challenge was interviewed with Microsoft. And I think it was, they only sent me a coding challenge because the job I was applying for wasn't actually, I thought it was, you know, being a developer, and they wanted like a quality assurance person. They're like, well, we might have this developer thing here. Take this coding challenge real quick. I'm like, oh, yeah, okay. So Microsoft sends you one right away.
Yeah, they interview process, if you get into the later interviews with Microsoft, they get pretty in depth, and they're usually a couple days long.
Yeah.
All right. Looks like
Hey,
Rebecca. Looks like
go ahead.
Rebecca has a question. Do developers ever write unit tests on each other's code or only on their own?
I have no idea. At our company, we do not. We write unit tests for our own code. So when we push up something new, right, we've completed a task, it's just expected that it has unit tests along with it. I don't know how it works at other places. You know, everything is, things are different in different areas. I could see that happening. Maybe it does. Some other people might have experience with that, but for us, it's just you write unit tests around your own code.
And besides Bob Martin and Googling it, like you said, are there any like really good resources you found for unit testing when you were researching it?
Well, there's a tutorial basically just called the Microsoft unit test tutorial. And that was how I learned to do it for my that first coding challenge. And it's pretty straightforward, especially if you are doing it in C#. So that's the only recommendation I currently have. But yeah, like I said, there's plenty of, you know, blogs and places that have, or even, you know, if you're doing it in a different language, you know, there'll be documentation for whatever library you're going to be using in that language that can be helpful. But I would say generally, from what I've seen, most people follow that kind of architecture of the arrange, act, assert. It's not, you know, not ubiquitous, but that's pretty common.
Got it. I did look at that unit test page with Microsoft Documents or Docs. I'm putting the link in the chat. Hope it's the right one.
Yeah, that should be the right one. Oops, I lost it. There we go. Yeah.
All right.
So one thing that a lot of people have asked is, you know, I don't have a job yet. I'm still in my boot camp. What should I be doing now in order to be ready for the job when it comes? And there's a couple things that I think are useful there. One is a personal project. You know, as you know, as early on as the first couple of courses of the Tech Academy, you can start working on a personal project that you kind of keep updating as you go. And that's very helpful in learning and also to show the company that you've, you know, gone above and beyond. You're not just kind of following the middle of the road. And I think there's also, you know, working on doing mock interviews, even from the beginning, especially on soft questions. Like right now, everyone can be practicing responses to soft questions on interviews, you know, because those are the things you don't want to be fumbling over in a coding interview. You want to just be able to have stories and things right at your fingertips. And obviously, once you're pretty much in the JavaScript course, you can start doing coding challenges too. And then there's a book also called Cracking the Coding Interview. If you're really looking for, I guess, I think it's helpful for everybody. And then if you're looking for maybe a job at Microsoft, you might want to study it intensely because it goes quite a bit in depth. But that's called Cracking the Coding Interview. And that's a very common resource as well for developers to learn what they need to in order to be prepared for interviews.
Yeah, I'd say a classic, well-known book for the interview. Probably the best-known book actually for interviews with coding. Okay, that's a long link, but I put it in the chat with Amazon.
So looks like another question. Cece says, how much time do you spend writing tests?
As much time as it takes. So there's a couple different views on this. One is people throw around the term TDD or test-driven development, which is a very good paradigm where you basically, before you even write any code on what on your task, you write the unit tests for it. Just the basic outline of the unit tests, and those unit tests should fail because you haven't written any code yet, right? Then you write enough code to basically make your unit tests pass, and then you take your unit tests to the next level, and then write your code to make those tests pass again until you've got exactly what your task is, right? And I think that's a good way to do it, and probably would make it so that you spend closer to an equal amount of time working on unit tests and your code. I sort of do it the other way around, which is why I mentioned when you come to your unit tests having a hypothesis about your code. I try to kind of write the code first. I'm not saying this is a great idea, but it is a way to do it. Write the code first, make it as clean as you can, and then come to your unit tests and create a hypothesis saying, is this gonna, this is not gonna work. I'm gonna try and figure out why. And in that scenario, it's probably more like 25% of the time is spent writing the unit tests, because I spend most of the time trying to get my code to work and then get, at the end, try to write enough unit tests to make myself confident in the code.
All right. Any more questions for Lyman? This is really good having alumni and somebody who's gone through the process of finding work after the boot camp. So really good tips and information for students. Yeah, go ahead, Tyler.
Can you believe it's almost been a year, Lyman?
I
Since
can't
we were
believe
on the live project.
Yeah, Tyler and I were both on the live project together.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's good to see some familiar faces here.
Yeah. Shared it on LinkedIn. I shared it back. I was like, I'm going to go see it. I actually think we haven't set a date, but I have one of these coming up. So
Fantastic.
mental health. You guys should come check it out.
Yeah, we look forward to it, Tyler. It should be another good talk.
Yeah, I've got to get my bio and sent to Lucy, so and all that.
Sounds good.
I recommend everyone watch Tyler's because it'll be good.
All righty.
It was great to work with in the live project. And so.
Yeah, I mean, Lyman pretty much carried us the whole way.
Well, you always have somebody like that, but then you learn a lot from them as you go through. So
yeah, so you guys in your live projects connect with each other. It turns out great.
Amen to that.
And I expect you guys to stay in touch now.
Yeah. We are
LinkedIn.
on each other's updates for sure.
For sure.
Right on. All right. Any other questions? All right, Lucy, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah. So next week's Tech Talk is going to be presented by me and Cameron. He's a job placement director here at the Tech Academy. We're just going to be doing a job placement Q&A. So just bring all your job search related questions and we'll be sure to answer those. I'll put some links just to RSVP in the chat box for you guys. And then, thank you so much, Lyman, for your presentation. It's great. And I'll provide links to Lyman's LinkedIn as well. And then just some other Tech Academy links. And this talk has actually also been recorded. So you can watch that on our YouTube channel if you want to rewatch over the weekend. And that's basically it. So thank you everybody for joining. Really appreciate it. Hope you have a great rest of your weekend. Yeah, and the link should be in there now.
Cool. Yeah, really good presentation, Lyman, and we're really happy for you for your success. And thanks for the talk.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for inviting me back. Thanks for everyone for listening.
Yeah, no,
Time's
really good information, and we appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Thanks, Lyman. Tyler, we look forward to your talk coming up.
Yeah, as soon as I get that stuff sent to Lucy.
Yeah, no worries.
We're dealing with like clients and like I'm taking the lead on this thing now, and it's just a whole thing.
Yeah, no worries. It's not until May, I think, so it should be fine. A little bit.
Yeah, I think it was May or mid-April or something like that.
Yeah.
Still got
All right, cool.
Yeah, thank you,
Cool
Lyman.
stuff. All right. Thanks everyone for coming out, and do join us for next Friday's talk at the same time and same place. Have a great weekend.